Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Hello. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you guys?
Doing all right. Thank you so much for
Great.
joining us today.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So I am Claire Mitchell, and I'm the one that's been corresponding with Alana. And so I really appreciate you joining us today. Karen, I'll let you introduce yourself, but we just did the cleanse. And so I'm really glad that you're here today and join us for this interview. But kind of I was thinking we'd do some introductions real quick, and then we could kind of start with the questions if that's all right with you all.
Absolutely. Let's do it.
All right.
Perfect. Karen Ganter, I did the cleanse along with Claire about 3 weeks ago. And I was just really excited to have a chance to talk to you, hear a little bit more from the guy that knows it all, and see what else I can be doing to improve my health and keep moving forward.
That sounds great. Nice to meet you.
Sure.
Same here.
So thank you again. Yeah, like I said, thank you for joining us. I am Claire Mitchell, and I work at Olos Integrative and Functional Medicine with Dr. Kat Hawkins, and I'm the wellness educator there. And so I've been very fortunate to be able to do this cleanse. We did it a month ago, and we completed it. And so just to kind of kick things off, we're hoping you could just tell us a little bit more about yourself. We'd love to know more about you. You wrote this. You've been doing Ayurvedic medicine for so long. How long you've been practicing, and just kind of how you were first introduced to Ayurvedic medicine.
Yeah, I guess I went to India in 1986 for a 3-week vacation to try to see if I could learn Ayurveda in that short period of time, and ended up meeting an Ayurvedic teacher there who took me in, and I sort of followed him around for a year and a half. And somewhere along the way, I had a practice in Boulder, Colorado, that I made a scratchy phone call that nobody could really hear each other. But I told my partner I wasn't coming home, and ended up coming home about a year and a half later. And my car was driven by somebody I didn't know. My stuff was in 5 different houses. It was just like, pulling my life back together. While I was there, I met Deepak Chopra. He was just starting an Ayurvedic center in Massachusetts. So I came back and ran his center for 8 years. And I was then thrown into the arena of teaching medical doctors Ayurvedic medicine. And so that made me really have to dig in and try to dig into the research and the science side of things.
Mhm.
And so that's when I started putting the ancient wisdom and the science together, and been teaching that ever since. Now we have a website at lifespa.com where it's what I do is I write articles for free 3 times a week with videos about ancient medical wisdom of Ayurveda and modern science. And I really believe that science can prove whatever it wants. So soy's good, soy's bad, coffee's good, coffee's bad. It really can prove what it wants. But when you have something time tested, that's been around for hundreds or thousands of years, and still around today even, which is interesting, and you have modern science to back it up, I feel like at least that's something we should at least look at and evaluate from there. And that's what I write about. That's what I do. And when I first started writing articles about it, I thought I would write, I don't know, 5 or 10 articles, and I'd be out of stuff to write about. And we have over 1,000 articles and videos now, and I'm just so blown away by how profound the knowledge was in Ayurvedic medicine, and how much research has been done on it. A lot of it actually on Ayurvedic medicine, but most of the research I write about, researchers don't even know they're researching Ayurvedic medicine. They're just researching cool things like circadian medicine. Well,
Yeah.
that's Ayurveda 101, or the microbiome, which has clearly been talked about thousands of years ago. They talked about invisible bugs that you couldn't see, but and now we have the science to back that up. So it's a pretty fascinating world.
It really is. I would say that I am still at the beginning of this journey and everything. And I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's 3 years ago after giving birth to my second daughter. And it kind of just started dipping my toe in more and more and more. And the more I learn, the more it's like you said, there's so much out there. There's so much to learn. And it's things that have been tested, over time, and combining that with the science of the things that you're talking about. I just think it's fascinating. So definitely your website has been a huge resource of information. So thank you for all of those articles that you've written, because they've been fantastic. So
You're very
um,
welcome. Thank you.
in terms of like the liver and gallbladder detox, right? Because that's what we just did. And the cleanse, I guess, might be a better word. So what would you say is, if you had to put a top reason on it, or, do a explanation to someone who has never really done this before, why would you say that we needed to detox our livers and our gallbladders?
Um, the same reason why bread never gets hard anymore. Remember, well, you're probably too young, but when I was a kid, there were there were bakeries on every corner or every little village, and they would make bread, and the next day it would be hard to give it away.
Sure.
Now the bread stays soft and squishy for months on end. It never gets hard. Well, what they did was they put, highly processed, bleached, boiled, and deodorized oil, polyunsaturated fatty acids, cooking oils into the bread. And they bleach it and boil it to such an extent that there's nothing in it anymore that the little microbes who eat oil, by the way, will eat anymore. So you put the stuff in a loaf of bread or a cracker or a bowl of cereal or in a packaged cereal or whatever, and it never gets bad. It extends the shelf life, not your life, but the shelf life of that food. So you take that bread and you eat it. It has the oil that no bug will eat. The bugs inside of you won't eat it either. So where does all the oil that nobody wants to eat go? It goes right to your liver and your gallbladder. That's the grease monkey zone. If you put your hand in the liver during a dissection, and things, you will see that this liver is the grease place. And that oil creates a lot of congestion in the liver and the gallbladder. The number one abdominal surgery in America today is getting your gallbladder removed. And this is a new thing, really, but it's really because we screwed up. We started giving these impossible to digest oils to our body on top of a low fat kind of a diet. And I'm not suggesting we should do keto, but I am suggesting that the liver has a gallbladder that is a sac of bile that's 15 to 25 times concentrated. So the amount of bile in your gallbladder is insane for how much fat we are designed to metabolize. We don't even come close to the amount of fat that our ancestors ate when they had to eat a woolly mammoth. And when they did that, they killed it. They had to eat all the fatty stuff right away because it goes bad really quickly. So that means all the intestines and all the brain and all the organ meats, all that had to be eaten right away. So that was a huge amount of fat that we had the capacity to digest in one sitting. Well, now we don't eat anything anywhere near that. So the gallbladder sort of just sits there with this big concentrated sac of bile and the bile sludge, which is a medical term, from all the indigestible fats that they put in all of our foods, and it just clogs up the works. I mean, literally your bile ducts are smaller than this pen, So if they get a little sludgy or congested in there, it's easy for it to get sluggish. It's easy for you to start not making as much bile as you once did. And bile is like the kingpin of digestive strength. Bile emulsifies the fats, the good fats and the bad fats. Well, the bad fats are the tune of 70 million tons of toxic chemicals, fat-soluble environmental pollutants, dumped in the American environment according to the EPA in 2019. We have to, all that ends up on our food, even the organic vegetables, you can't wash it off. You put it in your mouth, you got to break it down and digest it. So if you don't have a really good amount of bile flow, you're probably not going to do a bang up job of that. The bile is also what makes you go to the bathroom. It regulates your bowel function. So no bile, no poop, right? So that becomes an issue for constipation. Now, when the body's not moving the waste out, about 94% of the bile can get reabsorbed back to the liver. Now the bile, think of it like a Pac-Man gobbling up toxins, right? Like a little Pac-Man, gobbling in your liver, cleaning your liver and cleaning your intestinal, scrubbing your little villi in your intestinal tract. If you don't have enough fiber in your diet, and the hunter-gatherers had 100 grams of fiber per day in their diet, we get 15 or 20. So they had at least 5 times more fiber in their diet. The fiber attaches to the bile, takes the bile to the toilet with all the toxins in tow. You don't get enough fiber, which is the American way, up to 94% of that bile gets reabsorbed back to your liver, dumps all the toxins back into your liver, and your liver's going oh, you got to be kidding me. I just got rid of that stuff, and now it's all back. It's supposed to go to the toilet. What happened? So all that goes to your liver. It gets dumped into your blood. It gets stored in your brain, your fat, around your belly, all these different places where these fats will store. And it's known that it'll store in your brain. I'm not just making that up. I'm citing actual hard science about how this actually works, okay? Which is important when you think about cleaning out your liver and gallbladder, because there's a lot of, hate to use the word fake news, but there's a lot of fake information about that, which just drives the medical profession crazy about these cleanses. They think they're all ooga booga and crazy, but there is science to understand why they work. And that's what I hope to maybe clear up today with you guys, so you know what's real, what's not real. So, and here's the other part about that. is not only you're just recycling toxins, and the crazy thing about your bile is your body. This comes from the Guyton's physiological textbook. Okay, this is a textbook fact. Your body will use the same bile 17 times in a row, recycling it from your liver to your intestines, back to your liver, from your liver to your intestines, gobbling up toxins back to your liver, dumping the trash into your liver and your blood again, going back into your intestines, gobbling more up, no fiber, it doesn't go to the toilet, goes back to your liver. 17 times it'll do that. Keep recycling the trash, right? And until the body finally discards that bile. And the reason for that is during periods of famine or fasting, or when there was just no food, we had to reuse that bile. But now people are reusing that bile because they don't have enough fiber in their diet, which was never the issue originally. So what happens, we keep recycling all this junk, and that creates even more bile sludge on top of the indigestible fats that we've been fed for 60 years, when they told us that these new polyunsaturated fatty acids are going to lower your cholesterol. And they do a little, but they increase the risk of heart disease significantly. So heart disease didn't go away, it got worse, by the way. Still the number one killer. And we never really solved that problem, but that was supposed to be the answer. Well, it turned out not to be. So the first thing you want to do is get rid of all those cooking oils, all that stuff in that aisle of the cooking with the plastic clear yellow oils and the plastic clear yellow bottles. That really needs to just never be bought or eaten ever for any reason. And you should look at the loaves of bread and the crackers and eat only stuff that if you're making a cracker, it's just wheat, salt, and water is all you need. And you really got to get rid of that stuff because it doesn't digest and it's going to slowly clog up your liver and gallbladder. Maybe not until you're 60, 70, or 80, but that's the number one surgery in America if it gets really bad, right? So anyway, that's the problem. Now, the other piece of the puzzle why the bile is so important to keep it fresh and clean is because it's a buffer for the acid in your stomach, right? Eat a ham sandwich, your stomach goes, I'm going to need X amount of bile to emulsify the fat in the ham, right?
Right.
But I'm also going to need X amount of bile to buffer the acid that my stomach's going to need to break down the protein in the bread and the protein in the ham, the gluten, for example. And the stomach sends a message to your liver and go, okay, I just calculated I need 4 ounces of bile to eat this ham sandwich. And the liver goes, whoa, I'm like so congested, I'm constipated, everything's coming back from down there, I'm a mess. I can't give you 4 ounces of bile right now. Stomach says, don't worry about it, it's all good. I'll just hold on to the food for, a while. And until you guys turn the green light on, and then I'll empty my contents, And if the green light doesn't really go on, or it takes longer and longer for it to go on, the stomach holds on to the contents, the acid builds up in your stomach, and you get acid reflux, heartburn, GERD, reflux, hiatal hernias, all these things which are so common in our culture, right?
Sure.
So this is why it's so important for us to understand the importance of the liver and the gallbladder function, and our evolution, you could say, has changed our diet in a way where we really don't need a massive gallbladder anymore, but we have one. And that's why people can get their gallbladder taken out and go, no big deal, you can live a pretty good life without it. For most people, that actually is the case. So if you have one, you got to exercise it. And that means, using my favorite oil, and the only oil that I would suggest to eat, particularly in the world of, if you have any risk of heart disease, would be olive oil, because it's been proven to lower cholesterol, increase HDL, lower triglycerides, LDLs, all of that. But you got to make sure you get the pure olive oil, because 72% of it, according to the UC Davis study, was adulterated. So a lot of people take olive oil thinking they're doing something good, but it's actually laced with sunflower and safflower oil, the stuff that is just highly saturated and highly processed rather, and highly boiled and bleached and deodorized, which is actually the worst stuff you could have.
Yeah.
So you got to make sure you're getting the pure stuff if you're going to do it. And then now at least you've solved the cause, right? And now we got to go into cleaning out the liver and why you have to do that.
Sure. Thank you. No, that's so fantastic. And that's just so much to learn and use and kind of move through life with and just learn. That's what we were reading, the ebook about, and 50 grams of fiber for the month we were doing. And it was just we were struggling through that. And we read that 100 grams is what hunter gatherers were doing. So it's amazing, right?
Yeah.
If you were recommending this cleanse to people on the street. I think we talked about this once when we were emailing. Would you recommend it just for everyone? Would you say it needs to be specific? You need to have specific symptoms, so to speak, or what would you recommend?
Well, the reason why I wrote the ebook was because, I had been administering this cleanse since the early 80s when I first got into practice. And I only gave it to a handful of people when it was the right cleanse for the right person at the right time.
Sure.
Well, as all good things happen, it hit the website, and it got out there in a really big, major way. And people were doing it, willy-nilly, doing it whenever they wanted, not really doing anything to prepare their liver for it. And they ended up with real problems. So, it's a really good idea to know if you're going to do a gallbladder flush, if you have gallstones. It's a really good idea to know if you have, a functional gallbladder. So I recommend people before they do it, they get an ultrasound scan of their liver of their liver, particularly of their gallbladder, and they can scan for stones, and then you have a clean slate to do this cleanse. But most people who do it or need it have usually heartburn, indigestion, food intolerances. They can't eat wheat, dairy, nuts, seeds, gluten. They're on that track which is like the common track now, where used to be wheat was just the public enemy number one. But now there's people out there who write best-selling books, and I don't understand how they do this, because it's so wrong, really, to telling people don't eat wheat, nuts, seeds, grains, beans, legumes, zucchini, tomatoes, rice is bad. I mean, you got to be kidding me. These are the foods that provide, they're a little bit harder to digest, but rice isn't that hard to digest. I mean, in India, they would mix rice and beans and make this thing called khichdi, which is baby food. Half the planet lives on rice and beans. And now so many of my patients in my practice, they can't even digest rice and beans anymore. That's how crazy it's gotten. So there's a thing called hormesis. Hormesis means, a little bit of something bad actually makes you stronger. And the phytic acids in gluten and nuts and seeds and grains and all these anti-nutrients and lectins and things, they actually create a little bit of an irritation in your intestinal tract. And they're important because they are responsible for what's called gut immunity, which is 70% of your immune response. If you eat baby food your entire life and never irritate or stimulate the immune reaction in your gut, you don't get an immune response. You don't have a gut immune response. And the science is now in on that. People who eat wheat have significantly more killer cells in their gut than people who are gluten-free. People who eat wheat have 4 times less mercury in their blood than people who are gluten-free. They have more good bugs, less bad bugs, and a significantly stronger immune response. So we have to be careful going down the road of, well, you don't feel good eating this, take it out, take this out, take this out, take that out. Yeah, I get it. If you don't, I wrote a book called Eat Wheat. If you don't like eating wheat, don't eat it. But don't think you solved the problem by taking the hard to digest stuff out of your diet. All you did is take the symptom away. Now we got to fix the real problem and troubleshoot. And I have an ebook called the Digestive Troubleshooting ebook. It's free. All my stuff's free. And you can learn about what part of your digestion is broken down. And in the Safe Liver Cleansing ebook that you guys read and did the gallbladder flush, it also goes through some information so you can sort of troubleshoot what part of your digestion is broken down. And if it is the liver, then this is a great cleanse to do it. So what I did with the ebook is I put a 1-month, 10-step preparatory program to do before you would even attempt to do the gallbladder flush. And if you pass all those steps and you can do all that and you don't feel sick or nauseous or feel terrible, it's a really good chance that you're safe to do that cleanse. But just doing the cleanse right away, as it hit the web, I kept dealing with so many patients that would come to me and they'd say, I did that cleanse on the web and I feel so sick, and they would do way too many, and they would do, they would come back and they would do 1 every 2 weeks for 10 weeks and they're exhausted, they can't even move. The reason why we had a sack of bile that was 15, 25 times concentrated was because you needed a storage amount of it, and it takes a while to replenish it. So if you just clean it all out and have nothing, and if you do this cleanse, you'll know that the next day. I remember the first time I did that cleanse, I forgot, I felt great, felt clear, got on my bicycle. There's a little hill around the corner of my house. I couldn't make it up the hill, there's a little hill. And I realized, wow, this really does take it out of you. This is, and I'm pretty ballistic. Like I can usually bulletproof, I do a lot of stuff on my own to test things.
Mhm.
But I was like, this was many years ago. I had a lot of respect for the power of this cleanse. And that's why I wrote the ebook, to hopefully save a lot of people from just getting the one on the web and they just go blasting through something that might actually be harmful.
Sure.
Well, and when you mentioned something about eating wheat, like you said earlier, the bread that we have today is so, right, there's so many fillers and there's things in it that it doesn't get hard. It stays good for, months on end or whatever. What kind of wheat then would you recommend things like that to people if they were trying to incorporate that into their diet?
Well, you can take grains and you can just cook the grains and have it as a porridge and do it that
Sure.
way, or have it as, rice or quinoa or something like that. You can just eat it that way. Um, Bread, all you need to really make bread is wheat, salt, and water. So you can get a good, like einkorn wheat or kamut or some of the traditional ancient grains, and make bread with that. A lot of the artisan bakeries now are making bread that is just wheat, salt, and water. A lot of the sourdough breads are sort of way more available, and most of them, if you get good ones, are just wheat, salt, and water. And a lot of people who are gluten free have no problem eating sourdough bread, because sourdough bread typically sits around for, sometimes takes 72 hours to make
Yeah.
sourdough bread. And during that period of time, the culture is actually gobbling up all the gluten and making it much more digestible. So those are ways to do it. But if you just feel, and then the other piece is, if you just feel bad with all of it, don't eat it. But let's go back and fix the liver, gallbladder. Let's get the digestion
Sure.
back on track, and then begin to, test the water again and see if you can start to reintroduce that. And I have so many patients who couldn't even touch wheat before, and now they can enjoy, wheat. And the other piece of the puzzle, and I write a lot about, is seasonal eating. We have a culture where for the last 50 years, we ate, bread for breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day of the year. Well, bread's only harvested in the fall. And a circadian study showed that the enzyme that we use for digesting wheat is called amylase. And it increases in your body and mine in the fall when wheat was harvested and still is harvested, and not in the spring. So we have microbes in our gut that are specifically for fiber in the spring. And we have microbes in our gut that are really good for getting rid of for digesting starches in the fall. And we have an enzyme for starch in the fall when it's harvested. So the idea of us beginning to kind of tie our rhythms, our circadian rhythms, back to in sync with the natural rhythms is really important. That's why my second book was called The 3-Season Diet, which was about eating in season. And nobody really read it, but they should have, but they didn't. So what I ended up doing is just taking that, and we have a 3-season eating guide now, where I put every month you get a package of information for what's happening in March or April, May or June. Here are the recipes, the superfoods, the grocery list for each month of the year, so you can begin to get the right food in the right season, because the science is in now. We are supposed to have bugs that change from one season to the next. We have enzymes that are circadian in nature. Our digestion gets stronger in the winter and weaker in the summer, and the stronger to digest the nuts and seeds and grains and warm, heavy stuff in the winter, and the lighter stuff in the spring and summer. It's just how it is. I mean, this is the science now that's in. It hasn't reached mainstream yet, but someday it will, I hope.
Mhm.
Definitely. Um,
Interesting.
that is so interesting, right? And just the seasonal eating and the importance of it. So if typically I would say the standard American diet is not doing seasonal eating. So what would be some ramifications or I guess what would be the benefits? Maybe let's flip it and say that, of seasonal eating. Like, will your body detox better? Will you, things like that, and be more in tune with, I don't know.
Yeah, well, the studies show that the bugs in the soil attach to the plants, and there is a synergistic relationship between the bugs and the plant. And now the newest research came out just a month or two ago, showed that the actual bugs actually support the function of the plant. So it's not just the plant, which is which is giving you the biochemical impact. There's a relationship between the microbiology and the biochemistry of the plant, which is really kind of important, which is why a lot of herbs are sterile, because they're extracted herbs. And that's why at Lifestyle, I use mostly whole herbs, because you have the microbes in it. The natural synergy is there. There was one study, the one that really got me excited about the seasonal eating and made me take my book and put it on the web for free, was really the study about deer. And they gave deer bark in the winter, and they have certain bugs and microbes in their gut for digesting bark in the winter, heavier stuff in the winter, right? Digestion is stronger in the winter. And they have different bugs in the summer and spring for digesting leaves. And when they gave the deer the bark in the summer, when they had the weak bugs for digesting, it caused such a level of indigestion, it almost killed the deer. And I was like, wow, you're kidding me, right? Deer die potentially when they eat out of season. We have no idea the difference between eating in or out of season. That's how out of whack we are. And
Mhm.
that's where I started realizing and started digging into the science and really found out that it's emerging science, but it's definitely emerging fast. And the power, and as I investigate the microbiome, we're realizing that they're really seasonally affected. And we have to respect that. And that comes from the food in season, from the ground, organic, not sprayed, all that stuff.
Right.
Mhm.
That is fascinating. That's really fascinating. So in terms of cleansing, you're eating seasonally, you're trying to, eat what the earth is producing at the time where you are, right? Would you recommend then continuing to cleanse often, like once or twice throughout the year, 2 or 3 times? Just curious what your thoughts are on that and what your recommendation would
Well,
be.
the cleansing season from a circadian perspective is in the spring and in the fall during the change of seasons. Ayurveda said that the disease starts, this is a quote from the Vedic text thousands of years ago, disease starts during the changeover from one season to the next. Because you go from winter into spring, and there's a big shift between cold and dry to very wet and rainy and muddy.
Right.
And if you got, to the extent that you got cold and dry in the winter, is to the extent you're going to make reactive mucus in your intestinal tract, which is lined with mucus making membranes. In the spring, you're going to make more mucus. To the extent that you got dry in the winter, and we all do, is to the extent you're going to make more reactive mucus in the spring that can congest and take all your little villi and bog them down. Your sinuses get bogged down, and you become therefore hyperreactive to irritants, your digestion, assimilation, absorption, nutrition, detox, all becomes compromised. So you become sick because you didn't change over properly. Because nature just does it like, boom, we're done. Okay, winter's done, and now it's warm. But the body takes a while to do it. So if you don't prepare, and traditionally the equinoxes and the solstices and all that, this is when traditional people really did prepare with harvesting and foods and ritual and all that. It was just part of it. And we don't do any of that. We just eat the same food every day, as if none of it matters. And so the change of seasons is a time to actually to really, dig in and, clean the pool kind of thing.
No, that's fantastic information. I think the other question then related to that is if I were, trying to cleanse spring and fall essentially, what would you say the difference is in the safe liver and gallbladder cleanse, kind of the month-long ebook, that we talked about, and the Colorado cleanse, which is, I believe, 2 weeks that also Life Spa offers? And just, could you talk a little bit about those two different ones and what would be the benefits of choosing one or the other, or is it just dependent upon the person and their, situation?
Yeah, in the Safe Liver Cleansing ebook, one of the 10 steps to prepare you is what's called the short home cleanse, which is a
Okay.
4-day version, or you can do the 14-day version of the cleanse. And those cleanses are really the first thing people should probably do because, they're a digestive reset. They reset the stomach production of acid, the liver making bile, the pancreatic and duodenal enzymes all have to coordinate. So that's the goal of that. Plus, they heal and repair the intestinal skin and lining. They support lymphatic drainage, and they also detox the liver. So you get with the Colorado cleanse, which is a 14-day sort of that's our most common, popular cleanse because it does all of it. It resets digestion, does the detox, does the lymphatic cleanse, heals the skin, and all of that. And that's something that is but sometimes 14 days, oh my God, that's a lot for people, if they don't know how to do a cleanse or whatever. So that's where the 4-day short home cleanse is a great way to get started, see how that goes. If that goes well, then maybe do the Colorado cleanse. And then if that goes well, but you still can't eat fatty food, you can't eat greasy food, you still have indigestion when you do that, that's when you might want to then surgically go after the liver gallbladder flush.
Sure. That makes tons of sense. Thank you. Those are really the main questions I had. Karen, would you like to ask anything? Sorry, I kind of just went through mine, but I would love to toss it over to you.
You're kind of the other expert here. I'm the novice. The Colorado cleanse that you talk about, I felt like I did well to just survive the 30-day cleanse. For me, that was pretty intense. What's the difference with the Colorado cleanse that you talk about? What?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think the Safe Liver Cleansing ebook is a lot to bite off the very first time, and that's why I never put it on my website ever for 30 years,
Right.
because it wasn't for anybody anytime. But to make it for anybody anytime, I gave a 1 month preparation to really prepare. And then at the end of that 1 month, you determine, do I really need to do a cleanse or not for my liver? Because a lot of times you're better just doing that. So that's, and it's a really good ebook just to read, because it tells you all about why the liver gets congested, and a whole bunch of things you can do, like all the foods, the cholagogues that naturally clean out your liver, like the ABC juice, the apple, beet, celery juice. So easy to do, and a natural flush for your liver that you can do every day, right? So there's all that. But the Colorado cleanse is just so much more global. Like the cleanse that you did, it was targeted at your liver. And it's important because it's a real common thing that people have wrong with them. And it's a kingpin of digestion. So it's a good place to start. But the Colorado cleanse reboots your digestive strength, cleans out your liver, heals and prepares your intestinal skin, detoxifies your lymphatic system. And then once your digestion is working, it then pulls the impurities out of the stored fat cells. Because a lot of cleanses on the market, they just clean you out and they detoxify you. And it's great that they do that, but they never ask the question, why did I get toxic in the first place? Well, that's because your digestion broke down. You can't eat wheat, dairy, nuts, seeds, grains, legumes, nightshades, all that stuff. And then okay, now I clean myself out, but I can't eat anything, because if I do, I feel terrible again. So what the Colorado cleanse, kind of the Ayurvedic way, was to say, let's reboot function first. Once we get the body working, instead of shoveling snow in a snowstorm, let's go in there and clean house. Let's reboot function, and then go in there and detoxify the body, and then you're set and you're good to go. You don't have to go do it again and again and again.
That's great.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that is really kind of the questions I have. Is there anything else that you would kind of just share with the general public? And maybe it's like a basic principle of Ayurvedic medicine, if they're new to it, that they could incorporate in their everyday lives, like a baby step in the right direction, right? Is that kind of something that we could end on, that you might have to share with just the general public if they were watching this?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, a couple of simple things. One, realize that, foods, I wouldn't call it a good friend, but I knew Jack LaLanne years ago. And one of his favorite mantras and told me was, never eat anything with a wrapper. And so that means eat whole foods that you recognize, right? If you can eat whole foods and eat more of them that are in season from your farmer's market, we're moving in the right direction. Yeah. And then try to have more of your food, most of your food, and this is circadian science, during the daytime and less at night. Studies show if you have a breakfast and a lunch versus a lunch and a supper, you're going to, same amount of calories, you're going to lose so much more weight and be so much healthier with a breakfast and a lunch than a lunch and a supper, because the cooks go home at sunset and there's nobody there to cook it. So it just sits there all night long and we store it as fat. So those are simple things. Take time, relax, eat your food, try to eat less at night and more during the day, and eat whole food. And then you're on your way.
That's fantastic. So I definitely agree. And I'm trying to incorporate those, in my daily life, and don't eat anything with a wrapper. That is like the goal that we're pushing for, especially with my children. I'm like, no, we don't need that. So thank you again for joining us today and just sharing with us and taking your time. We know that you are super busy and we are just grateful for it. And I just want to say thank you again to Karen too, for joining us. I've learned a lot, so I really have enjoyed this and just really appreciate you taking the time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Take care, everybody. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.